Welcome back to MTG Stories. This time we continue the journey of Tovolar, Dire Overlord. After finally tracking down Arlen, the Moon's Fury, the Dire Pack, led by Tovolar, the Midnight Scourge, could not come to an agreement at first. They went on for days and nights, brawling in a raging blizzard. The pack quarreled over their past betrayals and the events of the festival. They went back and forth over the Volderans and plenty of other things they could not agree on. The one common ground they managed to stand on was war was coming, and the pack needed to survive. It hasn't been long since the Dire Pack made contact with the primal adversary during their last encounter with the reckless Stormseeker. With Arlen and Tovolar still not seeing eye to eye, but willing to work for a common cause, they thought it was best for them to remain split for the moment while they recovered. Tovolar stayed close to the primal adversary while the Outland Liberator tended to its wounds. Tovolar never got too comfortable though. He could always sense enemies near. When they made a full recovery, they decided to head back toward the snow-covered forest. It was time for the pack to reunite.
Let's get a move on it. We should head back toward the forest and meet up with that wretched woman,
said Tovolar. They traveled for a few days, fully aware that the enemy was trailing them. During a bright morning on the fourth day, the Outland Liberator took the lead, sensing enemies approaching. On the next night, there was a full moon. The Liberator transformed into the frenzied Trap Breaker. Tovolar then entered the battlefield, transforming into the Midnight Scourge, ordering the Trap Breaker to attack at once. The enemy then used magic, Divide by Zero, casting Tovolar from the battlefield, revealing even more sorcery. The next day, Tovolar entered the battlefield, transforming again, while the Trap Breaker went on a frenzy. The prosperous innkeeper appeared, bearing treasure along with it. The enemy used sorcery, environmental sciences to gain life as well as power. As the sun rose the next day, the werewolves were in their human forms. The primal adversary entered the battlefield, standing beside Tovolar. With a severe snowstorm brewing, Tovolar went to brawl with the innkeeper, removing him from the battlefield. He and the Liberator then went on a savage attack, damaging the enemy severely. Before they knew it, a scoot swarm appeared, a very dangerous enemy that seemed to summon insects every time the enemy gained power from the land. On the next night, there was a full moon. The werewolves transformed. As the Hound Tamer appeared with news from Arlen, he entered the battlefield, transforming at once into the Untamed Pup. The rest of the pack went in an all-out attack, trampling over the insects, destroying the enemy. Victory was at hand. But this victory was short-lived. With the arrival of the Hound Tamer and news about Arlen being in danger, the Dire Pack headed out immediately. "We must save the pack," said Tovolar. A few days after the Hound Tamer brought news to Tovolar about the Planeswalker, Arlen found herself face to face with a strange enemy. She was accompanied by the Kessig Naturalist, Outland Liberator, and one of the Hound Tamers. Barely recovering from her wounds, she decided to depend on the pack if she was to make it through this. At that moment, she thought of him, Tovolar. As the pack headed toward the forest, Arlen warned the group to be alert. She could sense enemies were near. On the third morning, Tovolar had arrived. The Kessig naturalist entered the battlefield to scout out up ahead. On the fourth day, there was no movement. But by the fifth day, there was a full moon, and the naturalist transformed. The enemy cast magic, faithful mending, gathering life as well as more spells. The Lord of the Overlord went on the assault, gathering more power. Arlen, the pack's hope, entered the battlefield, transforming into Arlen, the moon's fury, gathering even more power. The frenzied trapbreaker entered the battlefield as well. As the sun rose on the sixth day, the werewolves were in human forms. The enemy cast magic to send the planeswalker away from the battlefield. Dire Overlord entered the fray, ordering the other werewolves to assault the enemy at once. Another Outland Liberator joined the pack. Tovolar howled at the enemy. The enemy used Faithful Mending once more, gaining even more life and even more spells. On the ninth night, the full moon was out once again. All the werewolves transformed at the same time. The primal adversary entered the battlefield, gaining power from the Lord. Then without hesitation, Tovolar, the Midnight Scourge, the Lord of the Overlord, and two frenzied trapbreakers go in an all-out assault, severely wounding the enemy, forcing the mage to retreat. Victory. Bittersweet victory. As the pack stood amongst the ruins of yet another chaotic battlefield, they suddenly remembered the night of the festival.
Will the bloodshed ever end?
The planeswalker thought. While Tovolar looked up at the moon, he howled, before turning to the planeswalker, sword in hand. War is upon us, brethren. Innistrad will never be the same.
With talk of zombies, dwarves, dungeons, and dragons, we should prepare for the worst. The Volderins have the key, and they even begin to make weird alliances. Some even say Florian has human followers. I always said if the pack was to be strong, we are to stay together. And we will continue to gather our own strength. But with war happening around us, we can no longer afford to fight amongst ourselves. We can no longer ignore these strange alliances. We shall gather alliances of our own, for the pack will always survive.
Finally, Florian and Arlen managed to come to a common ground to ensure the pack's survival. But with war all around the multiverse and strange alliances happening all over, what events will play out next along their journey? We shall have to wait and see. Thanks for tuning in.